Hey, welcome back to the channel. Got a little something on the bench for you here. So this is one of my whoops. I've had lots of issues. Been very frustrating. I have 3 of these builds, pretty much identical as I could make them. And I've had issue after issue and very frustrating for a long period of time. I feel like if I make this video for you, you can save quite a bit of time if you're having one of these issues. In this video, we're going to go over bent shafts, slipping shafts, and how to check your motors on the fly. So that you can see if you're having some of these issues and not have to go into beta flight to do that. So basically we're going to look at bent shafts. What does the quadcopter do in a bent shaft situation, and what does the quadcopter do in a slip shaft situation? So that's what this video is about, so stay tuned. Alright, so the first thing we want to get started with is bent shafts. So let's say one of these motors has a bent shaft. So the propeller is going to be just going crazy. A lot of vibration, the propeller's oscillating very violently, and what happens is the quadcopter's PID loop is going to try to compensate for that. And what will happen is as you're flying along, the quadcopter will want to lift. It'll become kind of floaty. It will want to slide out. So like when you roll into a corner, it'll want to kind of slide out. It doesn't want to stay locked in. It won't follow your stick movement. So your stick is saying, okay, I want 20 degrees of roll, and I want 20 degrees of pitch, and I want like a 5% track of yaw as I go around this orbit. It won't do it. If that shaft is bent, the oscillations and just the sheer anger of that vibration going into the flight controller, it's going to just mess with your PID loop so much that the quadcopter is going to want to either fly away, it becomes very floaty, it wants to slide out. So pretty easy to check bent shafts. I kind of found a way that really works well for me. So we'll just grab my radio real quick and turn it on. I have my antenna on my ELRS module. By the way, I have a full video of how to get all of this stuff to work. So if you're having issues with that, that's quite a video. It's like an hour and 40-minute video. So I'm going to plug this in, but we're dealing with a whoop, right? So I don't have to remove my props. I'm not really worried about any dangers from a whoop. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to put this quad into turtle mode, and we're going to look at all 4 shafts. Now, I'll zoom in for you on like one of the shafts, but I just want you to see how I'm doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and initiate turtle mode. So that's my turtle mode switch. I'll go ahead and arm the quadcopter. We have no throttle or anything. And then here we can just give it like little, very, very slight bumps. Just tiny little movements. And then we could move each motor independently without dealing with the PID loop or anything. And that way your quad's not going, really crazy. But it kind of gives you an idea of what that's doing that. So let me go ahead and zoom in for you here. Alright, so we'll look at this motor shaft right here. You see how clear it is. We'll just bump that a little bit. You see how that motor shaft is kind of becoming blurry? Okay? So that is a bent motor shaft. You can see it walling around there. But this is like a really easy, because if you get it spinning too much, it's hard to tell if it's bent. But if you just give it a little bump, and then you can tell that shaft is pretty much bent. Looks pretty good. See how the hole doesn't become blurry, and you can actually hear that it's not vibrating on the table. And then we can check this motor shaft. Very nice, clean looking motor shaft there. Then we can look at this one. Kind of all over the place. See how it's just wallering all over? Becomes very blurry. So now we know that we have basically some bent shafts on our quad. That one's fine. That one's fine. Alright, so I have a motor here. The one thing I like to get is a jeweler's pliers. They don't have a gnarling on them. Okay? So like this would be a regular set of pliers, and you can see that it has a gnarling here. So You don't really want to use these because it'll bite into your shaft and make a prop removal kind of a pain. I like the jeweler's pliers because they're smooth. So I'm going to zoom in on this motor, but as you can see, this motor has a pretty gnarly bent shaft. So what I'll do is I'll just turn this motor until I know that which way it's bent. So we know that it's bent away from us. Now, if I apply the pressure on that shaft, you see there's an E-clip right here. Okay? Right above that E-clip is kind of a thicker portion of the shaft, and then the shaft's thinner as it goes up. We can go in and we can grab a hold of just that. Now you can really see how bent it is. So I like to use that base as something to hold on to as I bend this shaft over. So now that's just pretty much straight. And you can do that on your quadcopter. So once you get it bent straight, should last you a little bit. And obviously if you have to bend it back and forth too much, it'll either break off or it just becomes too soft. So that's how I like to straighten the motor shafts. Alright, so the next issue is slipping shafts. So if the shaft is slipping, it's just the opposite of a bent shaft. So the bent shaft causing a lot of vibration is going to make the quadcopter want to be lofty. It's going to want to fly away a little bit. It's going to slide out in turns. It's not going to follow your stick commands. A slipped shaft is different. It's actually kind of the opposite. The motors are going to slow down. So let's say this motor's slipping. The motors are going to want to slow down. They're not going to want to keep up the same pace because the flight controller is always wanting to make things even. So if the quadcopter notices that this corner is not lifting at the same rate as these other sides, it's gonna slow this. The whole quadcopter is gonna slow down. If it slips enough, the thing's actually gonna land like it has a dead lipo. It's kind of a weird thing to see happen, but it happened to me. So I found that I had two motors on every quadcopter. So all three of my quads had two motors slipping out on them. So it was very frustrating. So the quadcopter would it just wouldn't have any punch. You'd throttle up, and the problem was as the motor heated up, it would actually get worse. So like lap 2 would be worse than lap 1. Lap 3 would be worse than lap 2. Just very frustrating. So the quadcopter is not going to have that snap, but that punch, that drive. So you're going to kind of notice that it doesn't have that authority when you're really trying to push into the corners. It's just going to be kind of lousy around the corner. It's very frustrating, especially when you do a yaw snap. It doesn't want to rotate all the way around, and then it kind of loses its position, or it'll drift as you're really cruising through the air. It's going to kind of want to drift a little bit. Very frustrating. So the slip shaft, I'll go ahead and zoom in on it. We can take a look at one I got here that's got a slip shaft. So let's zoom in on this dude. All right, so what we want to do is we want to go ahead and hold on to the bell. And then you see the E-clip right there? Now watch as I'll hold the bell so it's not moving, and I'll just turn my propeller. So that way you can do it in your quadcopter. And if you're holding that bell and you're turning that propeller and that E-clip is following your propeller, your shaft is no longer welded to the bell, and this motor is done. So as I turn that, you can see that E-clip following. Notice that the bell's not turning. Okay, that's normal. That's the way it should operate. The bell, the propeller, and the E-clip should all move at the same time. But when you hold on to that bell and you turn that propeller, that's it. It's done. That propeller should definitely slide on that shaft before the shaft would slide in the bell. But you can see here that motor is pretty much done. Okay. All right, so I hope that saves you a lot of time, because I know that I spent quite a few races, very frustrated, really starting to kind of doubt my skills. I think if you have a bent shaft, multiple bent shafts, slipping shafts, whatever the case may be, if you have one of these two items, you're not going to be able to fly your quadcopter very well. I'm confident to say that you're not going to have a good time. So don't doubt your skills. It's your quadcopter. Get that thing fixed, and this thing will have plenty of punch, and it'll line up with your stick movements. So hopefully this saved you some time. And if it did, and you liked the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. If you hated it, man, you give it a thumbs down. It all works. Enjoy the breeze.